Welcome back, everyone. We're back together as a whole group for our second keynote presentation of the day. And this morning, Vera Almenleiter really pushed us as a group to think about what are we measuring when we talk about diversity and inclusion, and how are we measuring it? And um, this is part of the reason why when we were organizing the conference, I thought immediately of my friend and colleague, Lori Fogarty, who's our next keynote speaker. She is the executive director of the Oakland Museum in California. And for those of you in other parts of the globe, Oakland is a city very close to San Francisco. And it is a city that for a long time had a very strong personality and sense of self, and has become fragmented, as I'm sure Lori will explain, over time. And the museum, the Oakland Museum of California, where Lori Fogarty is the director and CEO, is very, very committed to working on behalf of the city and social cohesion in the city. This is a museum that is not just talking about doing this work, but is actually very engaged in the community doing this work, and trying, of course, then to evaluate the impact of this work. So we felt it was a really wonderful opportunity to hear from a museum, a cultural organization that is actually walking the walk. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Lori Fogarty, who will tell us about the work they're doing in Oakland. Lori.
Great. Thank you, Judy. Thank you all. Good morning. It's early my time, so I have my coffee, and I'm very honored to join this group and look forward to sharing our work. And thank you, Judy, for inviting me. And really welcome. I'm gonna do an overview of our work for 20-25 minutes or so, and then I really hope to engage in dialogue with you all and answer questions. And Judy was telling me you had some provocative questions that began your day, so I'm eager to put some of those to application with our work as well. So I am going to see if I can share my screen. Give me a second. So I wanted to just start a little bit with our mission and vision, and what you're going to see and what I'll share are a lot of images, because I know probably most of you have not been to the Oakland Museum of California. So I want to be able to give a little picture of what this work looks like in manifest in our museum. We're a pretty unique museum because we're a multidisciplinary museum. So we are art, history, and natural sciences, all focused on California. So the scope of our collection, which is enormous, about 2 million objects, artifacts, specimens, photographs, spans California. And yet we are the Oakland Museum of California. So as Judy said, we are in a city of about 450,000 people, right across the bay from San Francisco. And for many years, we operated as a department of the city of Oakland, as a civic museum. So we also have a deep commitment to our local community. So our mission is to inspire all Californians to create a more vibrant future for themselves and their communities. So thinking about the museum as a platform for thinking about the future. And our vision is to be the heart of our city, serving as a forum for dialogue, social connection, and community expression. So we very much see our role as being a civic anchor for Oakland. Whoops, sorry about that. So what I'm going to talk about, and I will say that this is only in the rear view mirror. Well, as we were going through this, we did not see this as, you know, 3 phases or very linear or kind of a natural evolution. It's only now, as I look back on the last about 15 years, that I can kind of make sense of these different phases of our work. So placing the visitor at the center of the experience, which we'll talk about how we did that in our collection galleries, then really building our connection to our community. And then what we are really working at now is articulating and measuring our social impact, and also really intentionally building social impact goals into our programming. So there we are. We are actually what you can barely see there between these two buildings. We are an indoor-outdoor campus. So we're kind of right in the middle between what is a very large courthouse and a civic auditorium. We're right by a lake called Lake Merritt, which in many ways serves as the kind of city park for the city of Oakland, sort of the central location for many neighborhoods that kind of intersect there in the heart of downtown Oakland. This is our entry. So this was we opened in 1969, and this was a very revolutionary building when it opened. It was really known as the Museum of the People when we opened, again, because we are a civic institution. We were a city operated institution. It was free when we first opened, and it was designed to be very much integrated into the surrounding community, not sort of the grand edifice. This is a view from one of our terraces. So we are a tiered building of 3 levels, and this is the top tier looking down then at the view toward what I showed you earlier from the lake. We recently redid our garden. So this is a large central garden space with a performing arts stage in the garden. And we opened up that back corner that used to be enclosed until just about a year ago, where we now are actually really physically making a connection to the lake and the thousands of people that enjoy the lake every day. So I started at the museum in 2006 and was really drawn by the opportunity to work on a major reinstallation of our galleries and a renovation of our building. We have 90,000 square feet of gallery space, 30,000 square feet for each of the 3 core galleries. And this project was in part funded by city bond funding. So we really felt a responsibility to the residents of Oakland and the taxpayer dollars that were supporting this. And our goal was to truly make these galleries welcome, relevant, and accessible for our visitors. And we have quite a diverse visitorship, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So we were looking to build in these kinds of experiences, very participatory experiences, chances for visitors to tell their own story, to in some cases, literally see themselves, make the connection between their stories and what they were seeing in the galleries. Working toward transparency, kind of taking down the 4th wall, if you will, of museum practice, building in a lot of interactivity, pure friendliness, particularly with the presence of our gallery guides, and really making that kind of direct visitor connection. So this is our Gallery of California art. It's installed thematically rather than kind of chronologically or by medium into 3 sections: California land, people, and creativity. And you'll just notice a few things here. The interdisciplinary connections that we make. You can see a topographic map in the kind of distance, really looking at California's landscape as we present the art of California. We do have signage in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and Chinese. Interactive elements and really family-focused participatory activities throughout the galleries. And this is kind of a wonderful sort of signature element of our art gallery, which is a draw yourself station. So it's a computer station. Visitors can sit down literally with a kind of iPad technology, draw their self-portraits, and those go up onto screens on the wall with self-portraits and portraits from our collection. So really, in this case, truly being able to see yourself and make the connection with artists. This is our Gallery of California History, and the theme of this gallery is coming to California, how California has always been shaped over time by the waves of migration and immigration. You'll see here the building is, as I said, tiered or terraced. So the galleries, the art gallery looks down to the history gallery, and the history gallery into the science gallery. And this is, this was designed as a prototype. This is a map at the front of the gallery where visitors place little red dots on where any place in the world their families came from before they came to California. And we designed this as a prototype, but it was to be a digital piece, but it was so popular that, and so tactile, and people really loved just the actual physical act of putting a dot on the map, that we've left that in place. And then here's an interactive at the end of the gallery where people can leave a memory, a story of something they think is important in California history for the last about 40 years. And then this is our natural sciences gallery. This really focuses on the biodiversity of California. We did repurpose and reutilize dioramas and cases with taxidermied collections that dated back to the 60s, but we repurposed those and really put those in a new setting. Again, kind of much more interactive. We focused a whole section on Oakland, really making the point that the natural environment isn't something that is far away in the mountains of Yosemite or the desert of Joshua Tree, but right in your own backyard. Spaces for just kind of communing and sitting. We have lounges in all of our galleries that can be small program spaces. So that was the work that we focused on for the first few years. We opened the art and history galleries, reopened them in 2010, and then the natural sciences gallery in 2012. And that really changed our ability to connect with our visitors. And we saw very different kinds of visitor feedback in those galleries. And then we kind of moved to the next phase of our work, which was inspired by strategic planning that we did in 2013 and 2014. And that was to think about the whole concept of community engagement. And what did that mean? Not to have engagement with our community just be kind of delegated to a couple of positions in the education department, but really thinking about what does it mean to place engagement with our community at the core of our work in every department and part of everybody's job. So over these last few years, we've done a lot of capacity building with our board and staff, really understanding concepts of equity and inclusion, understanding what it means to be a civic anchor and a community partner. A lot of work, of course, developing programming. We built our evaluation capacity. We did a lot of work to understand our neighbors' needs, to really go out in the Oakland community and get feedback from our neighbors. We focused even more on culturally relevant content. Oakland is an extremely diverse city. It's about 25% white, about 25% Latinx or Latino, about 20% African-American. It's historically an African-American city with a large African-American population, and about 15% Asian American, and the rest multi-race. So really thinking about an ongoing presence for culturally relevant content. We did a lot of experimenting and have done with experience and format, and I'll talk about that. And then kind of building out a practice that we had with our core galleries, which was co-creating content. So working with community partners to collaborate and co-create programming. We began to offer really consistent programming for families as well as adults, building in social aspects to our programming, doing work in the galleries, kind of activating the core gallery spaces themselves. We did offsite and have done offsite programming. We used a framework for our exhibition called Pairs, and really thinking about how every exhibition experience is personal, accessible, imaginative, relevant, and social. And then I would say really pretty critically, we decided to take on exhibition topics and program topics that focus on current and urgent issues, particularly for Oakland. So this is one of our large-scale community celebrations. We've done this now for 26 years. This is El Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead celebration, a Mexican tradition that came kind of reinvigorated in the 70s in California as part of the Chicano rights movement. And we work with a community advisory council on creating this event. This is another scene from that celebration. This is a scene from one of our offsite programs. We took a small little mobile vehicle and went into neighborhoods, participated in neighborhood festivals with art making activities. We did exhibitions that took on specific topics in Oakland. So this was a project called Oakland, I Want You to Know, that looked at the issues around gentrification in Oakland and had an opportunity for people to leave a message that we then delivered to our city officials. This is an exhibition we actually did on marijuana. It was called Altered State Marijuana in California. Those are live marijuana plants in our gallery. And this was an exhibition we did right before legalization of recreational marijuana was on the ballot in California. And we saw it as a really misunderstood topic, or people didn't understand all of the dimensions in thinking about cannabis and marijuana. And so we explored that through this exhibition. There's a section called Evil Weed. And we had spaces within the gallery as well for dialogue. Here's another exhibition we did that same year, 2016. The Black Panther Party was founded in Oakland. So this was an exhibition on the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party called All Power to the People. We had the 10-point platform, the original document, and then sort of blew it up here on the wall of the demands of the Black Panther Party. And I think this was what was so powerful at the time, because it came during a summer and fall. It was the fall of 2016. So there was an election in the United States there, but also it was a real resurgence of the, or even heightened intensity of the Black Lives Matter movement during that time. Interactive spaces, interactive elements for people of all ages. It became a real destination, a kind of pilgrimage for people to come visit. So many people in the Bay Area had a history of knowing folks in the Black Panther Party or attending events. Another exhibition on hip hop, and I'll go through these quickly just to give you a little bit more of a sense of our space. This was an exhibition we did on queer California, about LGBTQ history and culture in California. And this was the exhibition we did just this last fall, which was called Mothership: Voyage into Afrofuturism. And really the concept of Afrofuturism being that there are Black people in the future, and thinking about a more healthy, vibrant future for Black individuals and communities. Another project that was truly a game changer for us was a weekly, and I'll emphasize this, not once a month, but a weekly, basically block party, community gathering place, town square, called Friday Nights at OMCA. And we started this in 2013. And pre-pandemic, these were the kinds of crowds we were seeing. We would have about 4,000 to 5,000 people a week in our gardens and in our spaces. We had live music and DJs. And this became truly a gathering space for our city. So during this time, as we were developing these programs, developing these new practices, we started to think about our theory of change and our social impact. And I will say, at least in the United States, it has been quite rare, and will say, especially with more art-focused museums, to actually even think about social impact. What is the difference that we are trying to make in our community? What are we actually equipped to tackle? And how we're going to measure it? And so this, with our in-house evaluation department, this was something we started to explore for about a 2-year period. We talked to social scientists, we talked to researchers, we chatted with folks from all over the world, from other museums. And what we came up with was the problem that is facing our city and many cities is social fragmentation. We are a city of different neighborhoods, of wide income disparity, of kind of neighborhoods that are not connected to one another, where people do not interact. We have a lot of gentrification in Oakland, so new folks coming into the city that don't understand the history of Oakland. So this was the problem we thought that we could be part of addressing. So our contribution, in other words, our social impact that we are striving for now, which is harder to do during a pandemic and closure, but this is what we've been focused on these last few years, is creating the space and content for greater connection, trust, and understanding between people and social groups. In other words, greater social cohesion. Now, in order to have social cohesion, or to foster that, a museum really does need a diversity in its audience. And I will say one of the things that we achieved over these last few years, with the changes in our core galleries, with the changes to our programming was much greater audience diversity. So these were our demographics. Before the pandemic, I will say we are still getting back to full audiences. So we don't have yet a full year of demographics since the pandemic. But in the last full year that we were open before our pandemic closure, our audience was 59% women, 37% men, 4% non-binary. Large audience of folks that are under 45. So 64% of our audience were visitors under 45. And I'll say these were general visitors, not school groups. We also have a large audience of school groups that we track separately from these demographics. And 42% of our audience were millennials. We also saw a real increase in the ethnic or racial diversity of our audience. So 56% of our audience identified as people of color, African American, Asian, Southeast Asian, and Indian, multiple ethnicities, and Latinx being the primary racial and ethnic communities in our audience, and 44% white. We also saw some diversity in our socioeconomics. I will say this is an area that we didn't see as much change over time, and we're still trying to crack that nut and figure that out. But still a fairly significant audience of low income visitors, 24%. We were targeting with our outreach and our marketing the neighborhoods immediately surrounding the museum, which are among the most ethnically and culturally diverse. So a third of our audience were coming from those zip codes, or I'm sorry, 13% from those immediate neighborhoods, and then 33% from a wider range of zip codes that we had targeted for audience growth. And this is important. We are in Alameda County, and 65% of our audience is from Alameda County. We are a local museum. We are not primarily a tourist destination, which is why we believe social cohesion is feasible, because our audience comes back to us. They know us, we are of their community, and they are of this community. So again, this is just reinforcing that 70% of our audience are repeat visitors, 30% new, 19% are our members, and 81% of our non-members. So we do believe we have some upside in going after some first-time visitors to become repeat visitors, and for non-members to become members of the museum. This is a little bit more of our audience information. Again, I think what's really notable here is a large growth in our family audience, including families with very young children. We also saw that our audiences really have loved us. So our Net Promoter Score, which I think probably this group, and I'm happy to share more, it's essentially a math problem to say, how likely are you to recommend the Oakland Museum of California to friends? And if you give it a 9 or a 10, you're a promoter. If you give it 5 or under, you're a detractor. And Judy, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I know you know this backwards and forwards. 6 to 8 is your neutral. So you're just not telling folks about us. So you subtract the detractors from the promoters, and that becomes your percentage of, or your Net Promoter Score. So in our case, we had 82% promoters, 16% neutral, and 2% detractors. And that's quite a high Net Promoter Score for museums. So we track this regularly in our visitor evaluation. So this is then in our 2018-2019 year was when we first began to track our social impact in visitor evaluation. And this is just a little bit of a logic model for our theory of change. And the reason we put this together is that our experience with most of my colleagues is what museums track are the outputs. They track attendance, demographics, NPS score. I just showed you, we do all of that as well. So we have our inputs, we have our activities, and again, many museums just to get to this point in terms of measurement, how many exhibitions, how many programs. We began to get, of course, to outputs, but now what we're looking at is outcomes. So do our visitors tell us they feel a sense of welcome? Do they, and belonging? So our metrics for social impact are our visitors tell us that they feel a sense of welcome and belonging. They tell us that they see their stories reflected, they see their own identity represented in the museum. They connect with other people, and this is really important, both people like them, groups that they may have come with, but also not like them. They're encountering new people, and they are able to express their ideas and actually gain empathy, learn about the perspectives of others. And that's what gets us to social cohesion. So this is how we are now measuring our social impact. We use visitor exit surveys. We have been doing it online this year. Pre-pandemic, we did it through visitor intercept surveys on site. We have 9 scales. We have 8 social impact scales, and 1 we use as a test just to make sure people aren't just going down the survey and checking the same box. We also use 2 scales phrased in the negative and 1 reversed scored, again, to ensure that there's not just sort of checking the boxes. We have a 5 points rating from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And we are continuing to refine that to really test the viability and reliability of this data. So these are the scales that we are using now. And we had great success the first year. And what we have also done is some parsing of this by different audience segments. So we know that our members, our frequent visitors, our older audiences, and our white audiences are telling us, are strongly agreeing or agreeing more frequently than some of the other audience segments. So we're now looking at how do we actually design experience even more for a whole broad spectrum of audiences. So these are our metrics. I feel a sense of welcome and belonging. I learned something new. That's the test category. So I won't go through all of these, but you'll see that these are the statements we use to measure, and we had quite a high response from our visitors that they agree or strongly agree. We changed this last one. My experiences and identity are not reflected in the museum's exhibits, and realizing that was too specific. Not all of our visitors went to every exhibition, of course. So we've broadened that to kind of talk more generally about the museum experience and programming. Whoops, I missed one thing. So where are we now? We were closed for 15 months. We just opened in June of 2021 after our pandemic closure. I will say we are still getting back to regular programming. We have not resumed Friday nights because they're such large events. So we're still in this process of kind of resuming more regular operations. But we are not just saying we want to get back to normal. As many museums are thinking about right now, we have had to do some deep reflection over the last couple of years. A lot of our work has focused on our commitment to anti-racism. So we're now thinking about some of the lessons learned from this journey that I described to you, but also how do we take these lessons of the last couple of years. So one of the things we're very focused on is opening up and connecting to our neighborhood. You saw the picture that I did of or showed of the gardens, and now how we've literally physically connected to our surrounding neighborhood. We've had some different kinds of partnerships over these last couple of years. And so we're reimagining what does community partnership look like now for us in this time. Also, what is our next phase of community engagement? Again, a lot of the work that we were doing with the community was still kind of in service of the museum's goals. Our exhibitions, our programs, how do we partner with communities? All of those exhibitions that I shared with you, excuse me, we had extensive community collaboration with both individuals and groups. So what does it mean for the museum now to perhaps be in service to the community and help meet community need? We are working to build social impact measurements and design goals, even more intentionally into our program and exhibition planning. And this last one, it gives short shrift to this work, but we have recognized in these last couple of years that we can only build social cohesion with our community if we have those characteristics, those qualities in our internal organizational culture and our internal community. So what does it mean to foster trust, understanding, and connection from the inside out. So that is where we are, and I'm happy to say thank you to you all and welcome your questions or your thoughts or your feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. And part of the hardest part about being online is the lack of feedback you get, because right now you'd be hearing a lot of clapping and applause. So, but we would very much like to open the floor for comments or questions. And just as a reminder, down under reactions, there is the ability to click on raise your hand. So please go ahead and raise your hand. Lori, I did respond to one question. There was a question about the scales themselves and where did you steal them from? And so I know that Johanna worked really hard to develop and test these on site based on research. So I did answer one question on your behalf. But Norbert, oh, sorry, did you want to add to that? Or?
No, I would say exactly that. And as we go to the gallery screen, I'm also seeing John on the screen. And I will say that we're really excited to be participating with, I guess it's what now, a dozen other museums that have committed to working together and working with ILI and John and Judy on a study around well-being that you may have heard about during the conference. So we did develop this. Honestly, we couldn't find a lot of other tools out, that museums were using or other organizations were using to measure social impact around social cohesion. So we're so fortunate to have an incredible in-house evaluator who leads our evaluation effort, who developed these with a lot of feedback and testing with her colleagues that she knows from the field and from other non-museum field too.
Yeah, great. So Norbert, please.
Yes, thank you, Lori, for a great presentation. I'd like to know whether we have seen at the beginning of your presentation the whole mission statement of your museum, because what I'm missing is the object, the exhibit. So either still a museum or maybe a social center. That would be fine to have an answer to this. And
So my question when I get asked, are we a museum or a community center? My answer is yes. Really, I mean, we are a museum. We have a collection of 2 million artifacts and objects and specimens. It's huge. A lot of that is photographic archives. We have a great collection. It's California art, history, and natural sciences. We have incredible objects and works in our collection. So for example, we own the Dorothea Lange Archive, the great documentary photographer who had her whole career in California. So we do, and our collection galleries, which are really core to this experience, thousands of works on view in 90,000 square feet of collection gallery space. So we do have a deep commitment to our collection. And the shift that we made, our mission is to inspire all Californians to create a more vibrant future for themselves and their communities. And the shift we made was actually realizing our former mission statement was really about, exploring California's natural, cultural, and artistic heritage. And kind of the shift we made is, yes, it is about our heritage, but understanding our heritage is actually so that we can create a better future. So that was kind of a real mind shift. And you'll see that, in our exhibition projects like All Power to the People, or even more recently, the Afrofuturism exhibition, that all uses objects from our collection, loaned objects, experiences. And we look at the kind of historical context, but always we have a prompt, not always, but many times we have a prompt that says, so what? So what about that? How do we now take these inspirations and think about what we can do in our community? So, and at the same time, we have, cultural festivals and programming that really do kind of position us. One of our taglines right now is a museum, a garden, and a gathering place. So we do really see those dual missions as part of our work. Thank you for that great question. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Louisa.
Hi, I'm in a shared office, so I hope you can't hear too much background noise, but I'll just go for it anyway.
Yeah, you're fine.
Good. Thanks for that presentation. That was really interesting because we actually have a really similar project going on where we're trying to redesign our physical space to make it more welcoming and open to the entire local community. The reality of the situation, though, is that our program still predominantly reflects a very white, heteronormative lived experience. And I think something that we often sort of think about is in our outreach programs, do we resign ourselves to an extent to this reality? And I'm obviously aware that, like, in an ideal world, programming would develop, and that's a work in progress, but like the current situation is this. So my question is, like, in our outreach programs, should we just sort of accept that as the way that things are, or do we still try to reach out to communities and sort of say, hey, this is a space that's open to you as well, and we want you to come, and, like, even if maybe not all plays here will reflect or speak to your current reality, like, how would you sort of approach that?
That's a great question. I guess I would say I would hope that you were also extending the welcome to folks in the community to come back, to come into the museum or the institution as a whole. I will say that, that shift, I mean, it always kind of makes me laugh as I do this PowerPoint, because it's like, it looks so linear, and it looks like, and this begat that. And of course it doesn't work that way. It took a lot of iteration and a lot of work to build that relationship with the community and to start to see our audience change. And I will say that I think what has been very critical for us is that it requires thinking about that kind of connection in every dimension of the museum, not just in programming. So, we had our board of trustees, and I know, the governance model is different in different parts of the world, but, we're a nonprofit organization governed by a board of trustees. 50% of our board now are people of color. Our staff composition has changed quite a bit, the relationships that we have with community partners. So to really make that shift beyond it being kind of outreach programming to, really changing the kind of fundamental core of the institution to truly be welcoming to a broad community requires work on all of those dimensions. And that's why I mentioned the inside out and the outside in, right? You can do the inside out, but the outside in, I mean, that it's that dialogue that is so complex. So, but it's a great way to start, because you'll learn a lot through the outreach programming. You'll learn a lot about community needs. You'll learn a lot about perception of the museum. You'll learn, the skill sets. You'll make the connections that will help build toward that.
Talking about the outside in, and we had a discussion earlier as well in one of our breakout groups. Part of the work that Lori's organization did that she didn't have an opportunity to talk about is the organizational structure of the museum itself. The organizational structure of the museum is not as hierarchical as it used to be, or as you might encounter in other museums. And so some of that work internally is also how you're organized, the relationships between different departments, people in the community, how much agency do they have to make decisions,
Right.
and right. So
Yeah.
it's you can't just say your mission is to be part of the community. You have to live that way.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't start to throw in a bunch of org charts, which always make for a really exciting presentation. But Judy's exactly right. What I skipped over in kind of telling our history, our museum opened in 1969 as a result of 3 small museums that all dated back to the early 20th century to come together: an art gallery, a public history museum, and a natural history museum, that were all small and came together. And for years, for decades, they operated as 3 mini museums. They were completely siloed. They all had their own kind of staffs. And a big, one of the things that we thought about in our work is, the Bay Area is rich in museums. They're wonderful art museums, history museums, natural sciences museums. So what could we do differently, which is to really make those interdisciplinary connections. So that began a kind of rethinking of the structure that now, as Judy said, has really been pervasive throughout the whole institution of how we break down some of the hierarchies, create stronger synergies. And that's why you see some of these exhibitions, is all power to the people. It was organized, all power to the people was organized by an art curator, but it's as much history as it is art. So, we are able through our collections and through our kind of, DNA to make those projects much more connected than siloed.
Which also again connects back to Norbert's observation on the mission, right? The mission is different, the organization is different. We have to live differently to do this work. John. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
In fact, I was going to just jump in and reinforce that, and thank you, Lori. And it's actually a comment that I'm going to make in my talk tomorrow, but I was going to take the moment now to expand on that idea so I don't have to tomorrow. 40 years ago, it was typical for industrial age organizations that the value of their organizations was the stuff, the building, the machinery, the inventory. In fact, 40 years ago, Fortune 500 companies, 70% of their valuation was that stuff, building, machinery, inventory. 20 years later, by the 80s or so, that number had been cut in half, so that 35% of the valuation of corporations were, or the 90s, 35%. Today, that number's been cut in half again. So when you evaluate a corporation these days, we live in the knowledge age, live in an information age. Only 15% of the value of America's corporations, for example, or the biggest corporations in the world, is the stuff. 80% of their value plus are ideas, brand, experiences, and it's time that museums got the message, got the memo. Lori clearly got the memo. And so we're about to talk about missions, but our missions can no longer be about our stuff. Our missions are about the ideas, the value that we bring to the public through experiences. And we just need to get over it and get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think, Oakland is a very different kind of city. And Judy, you mentioned kind of, I can't remember the exact words you used, but I often say that we have a fierce civic pride. This is an activist city. It's been known, I mean, when the Oakland Museum opened in 1969, the founder of the Black Panther Party, Huey Newton, was on trial at that courthouse right across the street that I showed in the picture. I mean, it was the height of the civil rights movement. And I sometimes say to my museum director colleagues when they say, how could you do an exhibition on marijuana? And I said, well, you can get away with anything in Oakland, and we do. And, it's not, those marijuana plants were not from our collection. And we don't have a curator of weed. I mean, we really said this is an idea, and we do mine our collections when we can. We did have collection objects in that project, but we're many times starting we do of course start projects with our collections and with great works or key holdings that we want to base an exhibition on. But a lot of times we start with an idea. And one of the things I'm really interested in right now in terms of new formats is, why do museums start with exhibitions, and that's the curatorial track, and they do the exhibition, and way down the line somebody is thinking about programming, and how do we make this exhibition relevant to different audiences through programming. And what we're experimenting with now is ideas, and we could start as a program. We could start something as a program idea, do a panel discussion, do some sort of a programming idea, test it, meet who's out there, who's in our community that's interested in this, who should we be talking to, what really resonates. And then if it's like, yeah, this could be an exhibition project, then we develop it into an exhibition. So we're starting to experiment with that. And, as I say it, it sounds like, not the most revolutionary idea, and I know other museums do this, but it strikes me how difficult that is because of the mindset often, John, that you were just describing. Any other questions?
Any other questions, comments? Anybody inspired to try something in their museum tomorrow or their theater? We do have theater and other cultural groups here as well, Lori. Oh, Ilya, please.
I just have well, a different question. So I guess talking in a museum is a large part, right? So you attract the audience, you want them to probably discuss things. So physically, architecturally, how do you support this? Because in many museums, this is completely horrible. I mean, the acoustics is really bad. I'm just curious how you solve that.
So how we solve the problem of programming within the spaces, or
well, basically the acoustics problem. That's so that people, on the one hand, they can talk, on the other hand, they don't disturb too much the other people.
I guess I don't think we think about a lot, honestly. We're happy to have people talk in the galleries. And I think, that is for us a measure, actually would be a measure of success if people are talking in the galleries. And we actually do observe that. One of the things that we do the visitor intercept surveys, but we also have our evaluators, do timing and tracking studies. How long do people stay in the galleries? That's, especially with the core galleries, that was a big early indicator of our success, was that people were in the galleries for a long time. We have a lot of media pieces that are in our galleries. And one of the things, for example, we saw with the Black Panther exhibition was we had a media piece at the end of the show, a big film piece, video piece. And it was really exploring, the continuing impact of the Black Panther Party. There were prompts around what would a monument to the Black Panthers look like or be. What are some of the lasting legacies of the Black Panther Party? And it was interviewing folks who were part of the Panther Party, but also current, activists. And we couldn't get people out of there. It became, people would sit there and watch the entire film, which was 40 minutes in the gallery. And some of our timing and tracking, it became really difficult because we had shift changes and there were visitors that were in the gallery so long, And one of the measures we see of social cohesion is people who don't know each other talking to each other. And that happened all the time, particularly in an exhibition like that. So I think we just don't, we're okay being a little bit noisy. And we have beautiful garden spaces if people want quiet. So yeah, but I thought you were going to ask architecturally, with all of our different levels and different entrances, if it was difficult to do visitor intercept surveys and find where people are coming in and going out. And that is an issue.
Yeah, Melissa.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I have a question just as far as the social measures, and I'm just wondering about any community consultation and how you might even approach that. And that may potentially be what John might be presenting about as far as the larger project. But I'm interested in beyond kind of like participatory research, when you're developing kind of an instrument that serves sort of your needs as the institutional stakeholder, you certainly have to negotiate through what your institution wants to measure. But I'm also thinking through and just questioning, how do you reach out to community? And we all have our networks, we all have the work that we do with particular groups, but in such a way that you're also able to get really like how that community feels and how you can represent how they might want to gather that social relevance information. So I'm thinking, sometimes you might be on an advocacy committee or and you have somebody that's really representative of a community, but really kind of out for themselves. So how do you negotiate that work in such a way that you're actually connecting the right org or the right person to inform your instrument or your tool or your programming around that community engagement? So long-winded, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I will say, I'll answer it in two parts. One is really how we're measuring our social impact and what we actually feasibly thought we could do. Our first crack at coming up with a social impact framework was that the Oakland Museum contributes to a more equitable, a more equitable and empathetic Oakland. And our colleagues who are in the research and evaluation field said to us, good luck measuring that. You know, I mean, you're a museum, you're not going to be able to go out in the whole broad Oakland community and say, does this institution, you know, make this whole city more empathetic? And so we have focused our social impact measurements on the experience of our visitors at the museum. So it is, I mean, at some point, I'd love to think about some sort of instrument that could measure impact that we might have through partnership in the community. That's a great idea and a great question. That said, what we do, our practice is around developing exhibitions and programming. We work with a lot of community partners and in a lot of different ways. And I'll just give you one example. We are doing an exhibition next spring, tentatively titled, or working title is Art as a Human Right. And we're working with 3 organizations that are based in the Bay Area that are work with severely disabled individuals, art studio, long-standing workshops. And the work of these artists, some of whom have achieved real fame, and they're fairly well known in the Bay Area, but they're always shown just as the art, not as the story of these places and the relationships and the rituals and what art making means in the context of these communities. And we had a convening, which was a practice we always use as we start an exhibition, to bring in partners, collaborators, co-creators, and work with us early stage to say, what should this exhibition be? And this was just this week, which is why it's top of mind. And in that case, we brought in artists, and these are severely disabled artists. So it meant, bringing in ASL interpreters and really thinking about how to create a sense of welcome and belonging for folks working in this context. So we have a lot of practices that we use to develop trust and cohesion with our partners, but we have not yet developed an instrument that measures that from the perspective. I can't say that. I mean, we have done some, but it's been very limited. The other thing I would just suggest, a lot of our work is on our website, especially we try to be very transparent about the work that we're doing around anti-racism, around diversity and equity. And we did when we started the work back in 2013, we did a neighborhood study. We commissioned a study of our neighbors, which is on our website. So we went out first to say, what do our neighbors need from us? What are they looking for? And the Friday nights really came about in that way. We need a space in our city where multiple generations can come together and families feel safe, and we can learn about other cultures. I mean, it really was as simple as that. So the neighborhood study, the early study was very influential in that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're going to move to a large group discussion stimulated by our keynotes today. So thank you very much. And I encourage you to go look at the Oakland Museum website, where there's a lot more information.
Including org charts.
Including org charts, just what everybody wants.
That's right.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. A pleasure being with you all. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Bye-bye.